It's the hour. We're gonna start recording. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Saturday, August 20. Yeah, nice waves. This week is similar to last week in that this will pop up on the Religion Outside the Box feeds tomorrow instead of live right now. So you have more than a 3-second delay to catch your swear words. Okay, you feel so inspired. So welcome. I'm also calling in this week from the land of the Lumbee folks in Outer Banks of North Carolina. And I know that we have a practice of doing land acknowledgement, and in addition to asking for the names of some of the other lands that we are calling in from, I'd love to hear from folks about ways that you've engaged with that information. Have you found books about those folks? Have you been to museums? Have you found out where their local office is? So I'd love to hear not just the names of some of the places where we are, but some of the ways folks have found to engage with the information they've learned about whose land.
Well, I'm on the traditional land of this Stillaguamish tribe. I'm over the fence from the Stillaguamish tribe. They're just on the other fence. They used to have a whole herd of buffalo over there.
Wonderful. And so thank you, Emily. Did you learn about the buffalo? I'm sorry, go ahead. My feed is slow.
I used to go over there and just to check out the buffalo, not get too close. They don't like you too much.
They probably would really like you, Emily. They just prefer their space to people.
They give you the evil eye. Stay away.
Yeah, thank you. What about other folks? Where are you calling in from, and what do you know more than just? Yeah, Maria. Yeah.
I am on Blackfoot Confederacy land. There are 2 First Nations that I'm close to. I've had the privilege of working on both and knowing some of the people who live on the blood reserve for basically my whole life. And I've been able to help some of the organizations that are here in Lethbridge as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Anyone else want to share where they're calling in from and what they know besides the name or other ways that they're engaging with the local?
Well, I know some of the songs of some of the Northwest tribes here. I've been involved in a group called the Red Cedar Circle, which is led by a man known as Johnny Moses or Whistamini, and he has relatives in many tribes. And he knows like 7 native languages or something. And I've been involved in this Red Cedar Circle for some years now. But I can't right now recall all the names of all the tribes that are in this area or who lived exactly where.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. Thank you for that. And I asked that question partially because there's a way that we can develop practices, and there's a question that sort of lingers around them for me, which is kind of a so what. And I had a preaching professor in seminary who used to always ask that, so what, Tony? So what, Tony Afia? And I used to get so annoyed when she asked me that question, but it stuck with me. Like, so her persistence in asking me so what about things has really helped to form me. And and it makes me think about this a quote. I'm not sure who it's attributed to, but it goes something like, information is just not knowledge is just information until it lives in the body. And so there's something to say for, you know, the name of the folks who were stewards of the land that you live on, but if there's nothing in your body that moves with that information, searching for them, learning how to pronounce it the right way, walking to the tribal office to meet folks and ask more questions, it's just information. It doesn't actually have any embodied, grounded meaning for us. And so, and this movement, this land back movement, this movement to know whose land we're on, is meant to pull us into deeper relationship with folks who we've been cut off from. all of the purposeful splitting off, all of the purposeful segregation and genocide, we have an opportunity to repair. And this is one small way to inspire some of that work. So that's one of the reasons why I asked that question. And I'd like to invite folks to find some other ways to engage with that information if you haven't already. If you know the name of the peoples whose land you're on, if there's some other way that you can engage so that's responsible and feels good and feels right. Yeah. I think some good work can come from that. So thank you for going there with me. I'm still in the spirit of last week and thinking of the we that is here in the Saturday service. I also was so in the groove that I almost forgot about the prayers. So a second thanks to Kip for bringing those up. But I thought today we could frame ourselves with the prayers and thoughts of the folks who were lifting up in our community. And Maria is able to read those off for us today. Maria, would you mind? We're going to join in a minute of silence afterwards as you hear the names of the folks who are asking for our attention.
Okay. The people on the list who need some extra light and love this week are Peggy B, Chris B, Joe, Amy, Linda D, Elizabeth, Josh, Josie, Bill, Rita S, Rita W, Marilyn G, Greta V, Vashti, the Swedish elections, Abbas, April, friends and family of Josh A, the McSchultz family, James Wilson and all the inmates at High Desert State Prison, all inmates charged for crimes they did not commit, Margaret Cox and her mom, and Jess, so that the hearts of the property management workers will soften and give her transfer request. And if there is anyone else in our community that we can offer light and love to, please put their names in the chat and I will add them to the list.
Bags I had out for the watermelon rinds are what you used for the mushrooms.
And
Shmuley has put his name. Shmuley has put his name in the chat, so we'll add him as well.
Beautiful, thank you. And so in that same spirit of bringing things from just words and thoughts into our bodies, let's join in a moment of silence and take some intentional breaths to hold the folks that we care about. Thank you all so much. Can make your way back in a way that feels good. So I kind of already gave the answer away about our theme last week, but I'm wondering what's left over, what folks remember, what stood out. Was it a waste of time? Was it a medium waste of time? Like most things are in our lives. Like it's not a horrible waste, but it's just like just enough that it's like didn't have an impact at all. So I'd love to just hear from folks about what's left over on your hearts and your minds when you think about that me, we, or anything else that came up in maybe the after service times. What's in the room with us right now?
Well, I'll respond to that. As far as I'm concerned, we're all one. Everything, we're all one with just different inputs and expressions of who we are. That rarely changes, but when it does change, it's usually pretty much a kind of better way of explaining ourselves when we investigate who we are, what we're doing here, and where we're going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jack.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, Bruce, go for it.
Well, I posted some things in the a clubhouse thing about the subject of the whole justification for this racial thing based on the son of Noah, Ham, that whole situation. And I discussed it, and with the help of somebody that had really made some really good points on a YouTube video, which I put that link, basically debunked that whole situation. And so if anybody wants to read more about that, you might check that out. But, you know, this whole thing that, you know, that people are different. The three sons of Ham were all blessed by God at the same time. I mean, it's an allegorical story, but we all know that people can do some really strange things with Bible stories to justify God only knows what. How they do it, I don't know, but this is the whole racial thing is one of them, one of the big ones, along with Eve, and what has resulted to women because of that one. So it's on the clubhouse if you want to check it out.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, and thanks for shouting out the clubhouse. That's a really, can be a really lively spot. So if you're not active, there's another encouragement invitation. Thanks for sharing, Bruce. Yeah. Anything else for the? All right. Well, then I feel like Rabbi a little bit. I've got cards everywhere and papers and things. I am really bad at listening to podcasts, but I'm trying to be better at it because people who I respect love them. And I feel like maybe if I listen to more podcasts, maybe I'll be smarter and more compassionate or something. A little bit like reading enough books or something. And so consequently, after last week, I listened to a podcast. The first podcast I ever listened to was called On Being. I'm just holding this up so it's easier to understand what I'm saying. On Being, the host is Krista Tippett. This particular episode was with the guest Adrienne Marie Brown, who's an activist and is kind of popped onto the pop culture scene through a recent book called Emergent Strategy, which is about nature, lessons we can learn from nature about how to organize ourselves. And she articulated some things in the podcast that motivated me and the theme that I brought last week. And so I'm just kind of continuing in that vein. And if we need to go somewhere else, we'll go somewhere else. But one of the things that came up from that podcast was the power of changing where we are in our individual lives, because everything that we do and build starts to emanate out. Adrienne Marie Brown uses the parallel of fractals. Any math geeks in here know what a fractal is? Yeah, can someone explain fractals? Yeah, Rob, go for it.
Well, no, you're doing great.
Oh, okay. Someone has a fractal.
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. So fractals are a concept in mathematics, but it's really a way to, I mean, I'm not going to do a very good job. So, you know, listen to this podcast and Google, but it's basically this idea that there are patterns in nature that can be mathematically identified, and that the patterns repeat themselves at larger and smaller scales, but it's always the same. So an example of a fractal in the human body is the way that the makeup of our lungs is the same pattern as a tree, or your fingerprint mirrors the same pattern as that of a galaxy. And so no matter how far in you zoom in the universe, you can find the same spiral, right? So there's some kind of conversation happening and we're a part of it, we're embedded in it. And to apply that same idea to our behaviors might lead us into understanding how, like Rabbi says, how to be less of an asshole. So like if we take these Saturday service lessons and apply them in our individual life, do we create a pattern that starts to emanate into our block and into our community and into our zip code and into our state? Like how far can the momentum and the commitment take us until we see a larger scale pattern of the things that we're trying to to make happen in our individual lives. And probably more simply can just be summed up with this quote from Grace Lee Boggs, that we must transform ourselves in order to transform the world, right? So the fractals is just a more poetic way of getting along the same lines. So where am I going with this? Where I'm going with
everything we do makes a difference then.
everything
Right,
we
yeah.
do makes a difference.
It's-
Yeah.
Just like the butterfly effect, right? The butterfly effect. Yeah, you do something and you don't know the ripple that will bring. It could be close, like your family or your friends, but it could happen somewhere else in the world. But the good that we do reverberates somewhere else.
Totally. And even
Yeah.
to be less abstract, to say like, and I love the way that was again mentioned in this podcast, that Adrienne Marie Brown said, you're always practicing things. But to notice if you're practicing things on purpose, or if you're practicing things because they were a pattern that was given to you, right? So like if, for example, my grandmother was a very high functioning alcoholic, and the patterns that were established in terms of communication and values and habits, my mother practiced by force, right? That was the home that she was raised in. So when my mother becomes an adult and grows, she can say, these are some practices that I was given, and I can make a choice to practice other things. And the more I practice those other things, the more a different part of my imagination and my reality can come to fruition, right? So when we think about the me in these exercises, all of the concepts that rabbis introduced to us are inform an invitation to practice on purpose, something that leads us closer to the values that govern our spiritual lives, right? Those, how does he call them? The aspects of a healthy spiritual life, right? One of them is a hierarchy of values. And so if in my day today, I don't practice kindness, but then next week I'm at a community hall meeting and I'm watching this wild stuff pop off, it can't be that, oh, those people don't practice kindness and compassion, right? Because I have not been spending my days practicing kindness and compassion, right? And so the point of, I guess what I'm trying to help us think about, or just like bring up for a conversation, is that the things that we do, starting like even just here, the things that we do in service are a form of practice. Do you interrupt without apology? Do you leave space? Do you say thank you to people? Do you invite folks in? All of these things are things we're practicing either on purpose or by force. And so the things that are by force, we want to try to pull awareness into those so that we can make choices and be more on purpose, so that the things that are on purpose move us towards the more loving, compassionate, kind spaces that we want to belong to. I said a lot, so I'm going to stop. See what's up.
Well, I think it also relates to thinking globally and acting locally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, say more, Betsy. Keep going. Say more about that.
Well, another quote is that I cannot do everything, but I can do something. I can, brightening your corner, brightening the corner where you are. Every little something could possibly have repercussions that are beyond what you know about, but to have faith that those things can have an influence is what keeps you going.
And yeah, thank you, Betsy. And can you maybe give an example of something that's thinking globally but acting locally? Like, is there something in your life that is a practice or an exercise that helps embody that?
Well, just things, even something as simple as recycling and so on, and just giving a listening ear to someone who needs somebody to listen to what they're doing, and that can make a big difference in their life, and that they could make a big difference in somebody else's life. And
Mhm. Thank you. And Jocelyn, I see your hands up as well. Yeah, what's on your mind?
So the changes that I have seen from when going through my MBA and in business management and IT management, I noticed that a lot of it has shifted from profit to valuing employees or valuing environmental, having environmental concern, or having diverse kind of a culture. These kinds of things are starting to come up as a consumer demand more and more, and starting to see in business management how the conversation is over sustainment, and even though it's not profitable to clean up your own mess and take care of your own waste as a company, find a way to make it profitable. I mean, turn it into a profit, or just eat that, because it is environment over profit is a lot of companies are starting to put that in their that kind of communication, or in their values and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. And can you also say if there's any other ways that you see that trend happening in your own life?
Well, I mean, I work pretty heavily in that field. I actually got into my field just because I was concerned about the level of ethics in business management and in data science, the new science that's coming up. So I have a certificate, and I mean, I have degrees in IT and in data science, but I was concerned about the business repercussions of these things going downturn. So I actually went and got my MBA in order to be able to understand better and really start making an impact in that area, being able to understand the ethical considerations of a lot of these new technologies that are coming up, and also the ethical consideration of all of our resources being used up on this earth, and things like that. It's just real eye-opener to me. And so even though a lot of these companies probably had started doing this kind of stuff long before I noticed it, it was just that I notice it more now. Yeah. And I'm in a position that I can actually speak more right in that.
Thank you so much. Maybe if you ever feel so moved, some of those things might be fun things to chat about in the clubhouse, because I think what I'm curious about in hearing you speak is, if that's a more larger level thing, what's the reflection of that down into our community spaces and our individual lives, that like it doesn't seem profitable, not quite money wise, but for example, this just happened. My mom came to visit us. We have a plastic bin in our kitchen to hold our recycling, and then we have to drive it down the street to the recycling bin center and separate it. And the thing fell over. And so there's all of these cans and bottles spilled onto the floor. And she said, why is this in your kitchen? Like, this is taking up a lot of space. You should just throw it in the trash. And then she saw a can in the trash and she's like, you can't put this in the trash. You have to recycle. And so she did this like devil's advocate thing of like, is it worth the space in your home to accumulate recycling the way you are, or is it more profitable, right? So like, we're having these questions in our own personal lives as well of like, what's the value equation, right? And so I know that this space is not about recycling, but I think there's probably some similar examples when it comes to when we respond in anger, when we're feeling triggered, right? Like, is it worth it for the greater good to do a little bit of extra work now, even if it feels inconvenient and not quite as quote unquote lucrative? So yeah, just you were making me think about some of that example. Thank you. What else is in the air? Did anybody find that like they really hated thinking about the collective, or like it was like too uncomfortable, or just like right now is not the time to do that, and maybe another time is a better time to think about us instead of me. Yeah, go for it.
Oh, well, this gets back to the fractal thing, and quantum physics. We're all connected in one mind, all one person. That's the basic facts. We're all one mind. We all belong. We're different people, have different looks, but we're all one mind, one person. That's it.
And there's no way that we can hide from it or run away from it. So why fight it? In my case, I found that thinking about the whole instead of thinking about me has freed me from being self-absorbed. I may be going through some situations, personal situations and problems, but when I open myself up to help others, or when I think that I may be going through certain hardships, to be able to be more sensitive towards others who are going through the same thing or who will go through the same thing, has helped me to be more giving.
Thank you. That makes me curious about maybe a side of this whole thing that's got a little bit more of an edge to it, a little bit more spice. So some of the folks who I draw from more recently are more African spiritualists and philosophers, and one of them is Sabon Fusome, who is from what's now Burkina Faso, and she did a lot of work in the United States about grief. And her husband both worked in the West, trying to apply different African, like from their Dagara is the name of the people who they belonged to. Some of the values and principles there that could help us heal from all of the ways that our culture can be cut off and split off, and suppressing emotions and things like this. And one of the things that they talked about is that when that emotions, big emotions especially, are nothing to own. So for example, if somebody dies, that they wouldn't say, oh, Afia is in grief. They would say, grief has come to visit us. And so there are things that we work through together. And so it's really what you said makes me wonder about, for my own self too, how do I consider the we? And we can make it really simple and concrete, like here. How do I participate, and what's my level and capacity for being a part of the we when what's coming up is not comfortable, when what's coming up feels like disrespect, when what's coming up feels like being triggered? How do I still let that be a we thing, and what's needed for that to happen? Sorry, Ellis, go ahead. I see your hand is up.
Oh, well, that's fine. This is really fascinating, and you're the first time that I've heard that phrase that you used about on purpose or by force. And it really started impacting my thinking, because I realized most of my life, everything was by force until I started somehow, I'm not quite sure how, but somehow I started really inspecting what I think. And I've done a really complete switch, and just realizing that probably almost everybody works by or lives by force. Very few people, I mean, it's evident in the way the kind of news we get, the kind of political thing there is, the kind of religious stuff that goes on. All of that is not on purpose.
Right.
And so I think you just said something really huge with that.
Thank you for sharing, Ellis. And I think that what you're saying reminds me of another thing Rabbi said. I don't remember whose quote it is, but that everybody likes transformation. Nobody likes having been transformed, right? That like because it's hard. It's hard. I've been working with a Jungian analyst for the last 4 years, because my dream life got really active, and there's not a week that I don't leave feeling like I just did a emotional marathon. And it wasn't until like a year and I was like, oh, I get why people are so mean and hurt and like scared, because it's hard to face this stuff. It's hard to consider what's been forced onto you. I think Rabbi said it a different way, like there's what's caught and there's what's taught. And the stuff that's caught is harder to grab and name, but that's the work that gets us into a new state of being. And so yeah, thank you for sharing a little bit about your own journey of picking up what was forced on you and what it meant to move out of that. Emily, yeah, I see you.
And you remind me of a note that I wrote, I don't know, it was from last week or what, but what Ellis said reminded me of change versus transformation. And there's a difference. And it's like the change can be done because you're forced to. Transformation is something different. That comes from within.
I'm sorry, I cut you off. My feed was lagging. I'm so sorry. Can you say it again or go deeper? I think I missed
What did I just say? It reminded me of change versus transformation. And I think that the change comes from without, like Ellis was saying, forced to do things versus transformation, which comes from within.
So the transformation is a choice and that an individual or a community is making.
Yeah, change is something that the community is making me do. I can force myself into doing something because it's a rule that I lived by when I was growing up. But transformation, it comes from within and recognizing something from within.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to that.
I'm so sorry, real quick, Jack. Alex, did I mess something up with the view situation? It changed on my screen. I don't know what it looks like. No?
I don't think you did.
Okay.
Are you trying to look at gallery view or are you trying to look at?
I have mine on gallery view so I can see everyone and try to catch as many hands popping up that aren't digital, but I clicked something just then and it was just me and Emily. So I wanted to make sure I didn't adjust that for everyone. If you had.
No, I don't think so. It's
Okay.
It's for each.
Cool.
Each person. And the other thing is when I add someone to the spotlight, I think it changes views for other people as well.
Got it. Okay, cool. Thank you. I think Jack had a thing and then I see Anne, you're on deck after Jack. Sorry to delay you, Jack. Go for it.
Yeah, well, I think I, amongst the elders here, know very well that for change to occur, one has to be open to that fact and be willing to more or less take what comes if it fits, and it fits differently for all of us. And in the process of what we're all about, with one foot in our past and one foot sort of in the present, which to me is the spiritual life, that change from within only comes through grace. And one needs to be open to it. It's hard. It's an energy that is very difficult to describe in words. Really, very difficult.
Thank you, Jack. I'm sorry, keep going. I'm so sorry. My audio is horrible.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to stop you. Please keep going. I'm sorry.
And in my experience, it either hits you in a metanoia, which is a manifold change of consciousness, or it's incremental. But in any case, if you accept that it's happening, you're on very firm ground. You may not know how it's happening or what it is that's happening, but you accept that it is happening. And that's where we're all kind of everybody in this ever expanding audience is feeling that, or is going to be feeling that, as long as you hang in there with it.
Mhm.
So
Thank
that's
you,
my
Jack.
2 cents.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you especially to, I don't hear people here use the word elder in the same context that you just did. And so I feel grateful when folks lean into that role, because it is such an important part of the circle of our society for the elders to look whatever direction the non-elders are and offer the insight. So I appreciate you doing that very much.
Yeah, instead of their Samsung Galaxy.
And I think you were up next.
Yeah, I don't quite remember where I was going to go with this thought, but I was struck when you said the word on purpose. I work in an industry where we do a lot of work for nonprofits, and purpose is the word that keeps being used as part of the sort of branding of what these folks do. Like, we help people who have a purpose. So whether there are hospitals or nonprofits, charities, things like that. So there's that phrase on purpose. It's got kind of a double meaning. There's the deliberateness of it, and then there's the having a goal, and it is almost a spiritual goal or a virtue in that idea of purpose. And I don't know where I was going with this thought, but I was just, the doubleness of that phrase struck me.
Can you say a little bit more about the second part that you just broke? Like, say, yeah, get a little bit meatier there.
So the companies that we work for are companies with purpose. So they're trying to do better things for the world. Like, I left actually a job with a bank, and I'm now building websites for hospitals. So these are people that are trying to do good in the world. They're more community oriented. So on that scale of values, they are higher in the values. So they have a purpose that is bigger than themselves and bigger than their personal profit.
But I think you said something about the other part of purpose being more
deliberate,
and I think you said spiritual as well.
Yeah, so it's two things happening at once. It's a conscious choice to move up the ladder of whether it's goodness or community mindedness or spirituality or I'm having a hard time articulating what I'm trying to envision, but it might be a little bit, it's a deliberate choice.
Fulfilling.
Yeah, something more fulfilling. It's bigger. So even when you were talking about fractals, like the fractal patterns in nature are these spirals that go outward. So like a pine cone starts with one seed in the center, and then it's got 4, and then it goes out incrementally. So it's like 8, 16 gets bigger and bigger and higher numbers. So the on purpose is very consciously driving that attempt to grow and connect. I think I'm babbling.
No, that's great. Thank you for going in like that, especially on the spot when maybe you weren't meaning to. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Bruce, what you got?
So basically, Jack mentioned the word grace. Now these are one of the religious terms that has a tendency to freak people out, which is why we have religion outside the box to sort of help people recover from bad religious experience. But grace is a very Jungian concept. It is because, Jung talks about the higher self and the ego self, and grace is when the higher self kind of says to the ego self, okay, now try something different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's basically an intuition. Grace comes as intuition, and higher thought. And sometimes we have to let ourselves be have an empty mind to listen to it, because otherwise our wheel cage is going around in circles saying, I got everything all figured out when we ain't got nothing figured out.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. And that also makes me think about some of the and I mean, I'll frame it by saying when Rabbi and I got to see each other in person at the Wild Goose Festival, almost all of our conversations were about this. Like, I mean, because this wasn't a thing when he and I met, and you know, we just have our friendship has evolved along with his ministry. I call it a ministry. I don't know what he calls it. To me, this is ministry, loosely defined. And this thing of like helping folks figure out how to be kinder to themselves, that on some way what you're talking about feels like there's something in all of us anyway that is that, or we wouldn't be coming back here, right? Like there's some part of us that's like, yeah, this is a place that feels good. However you got here the first time, maybe it was that grace, that sense of higher self was more vibrant and highlighted, more easily observed, because you didn't know why you were coming or why you reached out to Rabbi or whatever, or like what it was that felt good about this space. So just want to highlight on that thread of like, how do we get to be kinder to ourselves?
Exactly.
There's
That's
also this name that there is something in us that's already doing that. So the narrative inside ought not be something like, I'm horrible at this. Like you're already in process by being here, by continuing to show up.
Yeah, well, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. The corollary is, if you don't love yourself, you can't love your neighbor. So you got to love yourself first. And so then how do we love ourselves in a way that's not narcissistic? And that's involving with the higher self and intuition and realizing, you know, our real true potential.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. Thanks. I'm noticing the time. We've got about 20 minutes left. Also noticing that this conversation, to me, it feels a little bit more abstract than I thought it might be. So I just want to do a quick temperature check and see where folks are at, if there were other things from last week lingering that might be helpful to move through together. I can sit in silence for a long time too, so I'm happy to just do that as well.
We like hearing you chat.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Everyone's so quiet today.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, that's also a lesson in nature. Like crickets die down eventually. The ocean calms down a little bit. So that's totally fine. I want to honor that. I actually don't have much else to move us through. And so that's part of why I also wanted to temperature check to see, because otherwise we can leave early with one homework assignment, if you will, which is to listen to that podcast with Adrienne Marie Brown. If you feel like you have an hour of time this week. I just found it really compelling, and she put words to lots of things that I had thought about. And I think I'll say that one of the reasons why I bring it to this group is because, and I'd been talking to Rabbi about this too, that like, I remember at the end of last year, I think it was end of last year, Rabbi asked me to facilitate one of the Saturdays. And I asked folks to use some words to describe what this service meant to them. And that was when I really started to hear the refrain of the word community. And we're still using that word here. And I've been really in my own life figuring out what that means. Like, what does community mean? What needs to be present for me to feel like it's a mutual community, and it's not just like, I call you my best friend, but you don't call me your best friend, you know, like, how is it like everyone is on the same page? And so I've been asking some questions about that in my own life, and the podcast, the way that Adrienne Marie Brown talked about things made me think about this particular community and how we move together, and what's our dream together, what's our wildest imagination of the world, and how do we each be in all of the lands that we are in with that same shared imagination for what can be. So I'll stop. But Bob, I see your hand is up. Yeah, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we forget about is humor. And that I think that when
It's not funny, Bob.
I know, Rob. and that was a good thing because it created some laughter, and that's a good thing. And I think laughter is something that we sometimes forget about. But that I think that what I find in my interaction with people is that if humor can be respectful or it can be disrespectful, but in respectful humor is when you get laughter from people, and that what I think that does is that lightens the soul too. And that, so I think sometimes we can get too serious about some things that we overlook the opportunities for laughter. And that, what I like is when I'm on the phone with people to see what I can do to get a little bit of laughter out of them. And that what usually I get a response in is, I really needed that. I really needed that today. My day was going tough, and your little joke, like something simple, like when people tell me to please hold, I tell them I don't have any monkey bars, and so it just a little bit of lightness, I think, helps everything go along a whole lot better. And that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I also think that that's a part of nature too. And these, like, there's a lot of humor and ridiculous stuff that goes down. Some animals look wild and funny, and I mean, like, it can be in any measure of ways. But yeah, thank you for reminding us to laugh. It does help you live longer. Science said so. There are people spend money to learn that laughing will keep you here just a little bit longer.
All of creation is God's joke.
Right, we're a part of it. So let's start laughing. Ellis, what you got?
Well, it's not so much along the laughter side, although I enjoy all that kind of thing. Is I'm sitting here. Usually it's really easy for me to kind of fit in with the conversation. And then I realize that I'm trying to learn how to fit in to your world, Afia, because you present differently than Rabbi does. And so I just find it really fascinating that how we each respond to the input we get. And I'm one of those people that I have to kind of let it roll around a while. I'm not so much of an instant, have a response to something you said instantly. But so it's just kind of, this whole group, I just have to say that it feels like my group in the out of the box service, because there's so much wisdom here. It's just, to me, it's fascinating. Today is a really good example of some really heartfelt, well thought out ideas and thoughts, as well as yours as you're bringing to. So that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Ellis. Thank you. And yeah, I was talking to Rabbi. It's sort of every time before he asks me if I'll take a Saturday for him, I go through this internal process. A lot of times I do it externally with him too, of like, where's the group at? How's it going to be? What's the transition going to be like for me to step into this role of like being the one who throws stuff at our wall to see what sticks? Because yeah, it's a different, we're different styles, we're different people. Even if we looked similar and we're both rabbis, it would still be a difference. And so I think it's powerful to name that. And I will for sure not go and think nobody said anything because I was some wackadoo on center stage. Like, yeah, it's real. These are different concepts. It's also just like a part of my own mind that may not make a whole lot of sense anyway. So I usually start when I get to facilitate. So thank you, Alice, for bringing me to this, because what you're saying is reminding me of a value of mine, which I did not practice. So apologies for that. is to just acknowledge that you have a choice in where you place your focus, and you've shared your focus with me, and that's a deep sacred act of trust, even if you know you don't trust me, right? Like, even if you know I don't really vibe with Afia, but I love these people, so I'm going to be here. Wherever you are on the spectrum, it's meaningful to have shared attention and mental space with you. So thank you all for being so gracious in that way. And yeah, that's all I got. So I think, oh yeah, Carol, is that a hand raise?
Yes. First of all, I think you're too apologetic. I think you're doing a wonderful job here, and you should keep saying, I'm not rabbi. We know you're not rabbi. You're you, and you're presenting something that's very important. So I think, first of all, claim yourself. You're telling us all to do that. Do it yourself. But I wanted to go back to this question about purpose and which things are external and which things are internal. I believe that the external one is what you mean by teleology. That's what you're saying, is that this whole world finally is meaningful, even though we don't get the meaning, but we participate in it. And we get to understand it better by what we're doing than by thinking about it or writing about it. I mean, I've spent a lot of time writing and teaching, but it's living that really gives you the answers. And the second thing is, virtue is an intrinsic good. It's not because anyone else is going to reward you for it. You do what you do because it's the right thing to do, and you can feel it in yourself. And if you're looking for a reward, then you're no better than anyone else selling anything. You can sell virtue, but then it's not virtue. You're doing it because it's an intrinsic good.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carol.
Amen. Amen.
Also, thank you for being a part of my own learning, because my mom has been telling me I apologize too much since I was a baby. So that's one of my lifelong lessons. So.
Well, I think it's important to model self-acceptance and recognizing that what you're giving is what you have to give.
Your apology is accepted.
Oh dear.
And things that are real often given and received in silence.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I think what happens next, if there's nothing left for the good of the whole,
Well, we could read for hours. We could go on for hours. You know, it's like...
I know, I feel it. I feel it. It's great.
Yeah.
Don't forget, there's the YouTube chat, there's Facebook, there's Clubhouse. So it doesn't have to end here at all. But want to make some space for donuts. I know Poetry Room is not an option today because folks are traveling, and I think Kip as well is not on. Am I missing that? Okay. Maria and Alex, is it true that we have donuts today? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
So hang around for that if it feels good. Otherwise, hope y'all have a really lovely rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next week to go in again on.
That's great.
Yeah.
And we thank you,
Thank
Afia.
you.
Thank you.
I thank you.
Once again,
Thank you
I
very
think
much.
Thank you.
you know, I think that
You
you
are
feel like you're
welcome.
filling pretty big shoes, but you are doing a really wonderful job. And so we
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
And before I
Thank
stop
you.
recording, let's everybody give a wave to our friends on Facebook and YouTube who will be seeing this later. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, y'all.
Two.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.